flashes of memory.
I always knew there was something off about my parents. I just wish I was the only one who figured out the truth. They told me it was PTSD, but I thought that was reserved for war veterans who saw some things, or rape victims who had to undergo the torture of a lifetime in their very skin. They told me that the anxiety was not normal teenage angst that I couldn't deal with on a normal basis, but rather caused by something much deeper than that, and I just had to be okay with that answer. As I told the doctor my life story, the only thing nagging me was the fact that I would never see my parents again. I was told that I have a very extensive memory, and I remember pieces of my past that I can't quite piece together. I remember for some reason being very small and vulnerable, and being carried in the middle of the night in a very harsh breeze, and knowing my father was carrying me along, but it didn't feel like my father. I remember screaming my lungs out and waking up the next day in a daze, even at such a young age. I always attributed these issues to the fact that my childhood was a particularly abnormal one, and I was thrust into a strange life of homeschooling and parents who didn't believe in elementary-age freedom. I grew up without friends, without that normal life I saw people living on the small screen of the fuzzy television in my bedroom, my gateway to the real world. The doctor tapped his pen against his paper and then resumed to that annoying posture he had, where he would hunch over and glance down at what he had written, chewing on the cap of the pen like he hadn't had enough to eat. "And so, Felicity?" "That isn't my name," I said. I sighed again, probably for the 100th time that morning. "My name is Gabby. That's what my parents call me." "Okay, so Gabby," he continued, "when was it that you realized that you were a little girl living a very different lifestyle from other kids?" I shrugged my shoulders and rattled off my life story as if there wasn't a thing wrong in the world. I wasn't even so sure myself that there was at this point. It was simple, really. My parents had this in-home business fixing other people's technology, such as broken computers or replacing screens on phones. It wasn't very well known, but it paid the bills on our small house, and eventually it became their steady full-time job. Somewhere along the lines, my parents started taking in foster children for weeks at a time, until they were adopted out into the system. I jealously sat upstairs and minded my own business, doing my homework and watching television, reading books and learning so much about the outside world. The teenage girls that sometimes showed up at the house for a few weeks at a time, until their permanent homes claimed them, were permitted to sleep in the downstairs basement my parents kept for them. I had a special hatred for these girls, and the fact that they were chosen to have a real home with real parents who cared about them. They had something so true and special, and a chance to find themselves in the outside world. Meanwhile, I had the worst parents in the world. They made sure I was fed and got my education, and nothing else really mattered. Did you ever find it strange that your parents never permitted you to leave home? They did sometimes. I trailed off to the doctor, untrusting of him but feeling the need to spill the story. I went to the grocery store with them a few times, but they always took me in the winter when I could dress heavily. You know, like the scarf around the mouth and the hat pulled down to my eyes. I remember the shocked look on my mother's face when she took me out one Saturday morning for the simple task of collecting some eggs at the local grocery store, and by some chance ran into a woman she recognized. "Susan," the woman gasped as she ran up to my mother. "I haven't seen you in years. Since 9th grade, at least." "Oh yeah," my mother had sputtered a bit nervously, probably because she was supposed to be home quickly to start making breakfast for the family. "Yeah, isn't this so weird? We're about 10 hours away from our hometown and I run into you. What? Are you here on vacation?" "No, I live here with my family now. We've been here since my daughter was first born." My mother had never told me that we lived in another state prior, or that at the very least she and my father had. I raised my eyebrow, but I knew better than to ask questions. There was nothing they hated more. "Oh, well, that's just wonderful. Good for you." And then she disappeared as quickly as she had come. My mother and I went back home, and I didn't leave the house for another year. Unless it was to play in the woods behind our house, as I typically did, so I could inspect this outside world I so yearned to be a part of. As for running away, no, I never wanted that. As little as I got acquainted with the world and all the things I could see, I knew my parents had it in my best interest. I was always told that parents look out for you, and that they are the only people in this dark, crazy world that we can trust. And trust is a very strong thing that I held close. The doctor wrote down some things in an attempt to keep up with my speaking pace, and then he nibbled on his pen in that stupid way again, looking at me from over the top of his glasses. "Did you ever speak to any of the foster children?" "They didn't want me to. My parents, I mean. They warned me that many of these girls came from very broken homes where people did terrible things to them, and they were conditioned to feed people lies or even try to turn people against one another. I knew that there was something very dark about these girls with the sunken eyes and the bruises all over their bodies that were potentially self-inflicted. A few times I would pass one in the hall and they never ever had dinner with us. I knew there was a pain story in their eyes. They looked at me desperately like I was their one true hope in the world. But I was just a simple shrug of the shoulders. The girl who was protected by her own mother and father like some hermit who never left the house or even saw the stars. I was of no help. One day a woman came into my parents' shop in the basement, and I was typing out some homework in the side room while they chatted away. The woman was going on and on about how teenagers will be teenagers. You know how they are. While my parents gave hearty laughs and said that they understood completely, they had one of their own. The conversation unfolded, and I came to find out that the woman was stopping in to drop off her teenage daughter's cell phone after she had dropped it on the tile at their house, and the screen had smashed into oblivion. The mother sounded exhausted and frazzled, the kind of person that you don't even have to see without knowing that their personality was very introverted and that they've been through a lot. Suddenly I heard the bell go off to the business, and a girl came in. I could tell from her voice. "Mom, are you ready to go? I've been sitting out there in the cold car for like 15 minutes now." I peered around the corner, and although I couldn't see the mother and daughter, I saw my father, and I saw the look on his face. Shock, pure horror, resentment for the situation, and a need to escape what was currently happening. Well, thanks for stopping by, and we'll get this phone back to you real quick." Before they could leave, I decided to take it upon myself to see what had caused my father to react so badly. I came out of the side room to introduce myself, something I rarely got to do with customers. There, standing in front of me, was a girl bundled up in a beautiful pea coat with her hair in blonde braids and beautiful green eyes. My blonde hair and my green eyes shining right back into mine. Our expressions as equally shocked and horrified. "What did you think when you saw the girl?" the doctor questioned next, scribbling down notes by the second. On to something like one of those detectives that I sometimes watched on television, who clearly solved the case. "I don't know. I guess I thought it was odd that there was a girl standing there who looked exactly like me." "And you didn't think for one second that she was your sister? That the lady standing in front of you could be your real mother, and that you had a twin?" "Oh, never for a second," I replied with tears starting to form in my eyes, something hitting home. I'm seriously sick of people saying things about my parents, the way they call them kidnappers, after they took such good care of the foster children and I. I'm a lucky girl with a lot of chances in this life because of them. I didn't think about the doctor for a few days after our meeting. I had enough on my mind as was. My parents were gone, and that terrible woman, the one from my parents' store, was trying to get into contact with me again. The one who stole my face and planted it on her own daughters. And no science I've ever seen on television could explain that. I had a lot of questions for my parents, the ones who always promised to love me and care for me, I wasn't sure how they would ever be able to do that from a jail cell, or when I would ever hear from them again, but I promised to wait for the day. Until then, I'll ignore the newspapers and headlines on nighttime news stations talking about how my parents were two of the owners of one of the biggest sex trafficking rings in history. I'll remember them for the way that they put my education before everything, and always home-cooked meals for the girls in the home, the ones who were afraid of their previous home lives and found comfort in my parents somehow. I'll always see them as the good guys in this crime show, and love them. This is the terrifying reason why I will not babysit anymore. Here's something I don't advertise on my Sitter City profile. I hate children, but I do love video games and easy money, so that makes for a pretty smooth operation when it comes to taking care of other people's kids for a few hours. No video games and no candy is the most common creed of today's parents. So I wait until they are completely gone before hauling my Xbox out of the car and hooking it up in the living room. Sometimes I get lucky and sit for a family whose kids have never played video games before. Those are the real winners. Put a game controller in the hands of an adolescent for the first time, and you might as well be giving them crack. No quality time, no need for interacting and imposing authority. The games do all of the work for me. The candy too is vital. You may not know this, but candy is a ubiquitous incentive to keep kids from ratting you out. Money hasn't yet taken up that all-important significance in their mind. Candy is what they know and love. One time I snuck my nephew a king-size Snickers bar after his mom told him he couldn't have any chocolate. I pressed my finger to my lips. He nodded. He went secretly into a walk-in closet and came out with nothing but a smile on his face. That kid still loves me for that to this day. Only once did my scheme hit a snag, but it was enough to make me never want to babysit again. Also, I'm pretty sure I never even want to have children anymore. I know some kids can be a little off, but I could never have imagined those three little manifestations from hell. I should have seen it coming by the way they were dressed up like old Victorian dolls. They lived in a plain-looking 2-story house set in front of 10 acres of property. I saw horses corralled in the back and a sty for pigs. When I got out of my car, Miss Whitley had her 3 girls lined up tallest to shortest underneath the portico. She looked alarmed as I approached. "Who are you?" she croaked. "James?" My reply came out as more of a question than an answer. I too was wondering if there had been some kind of a mistake. "From the website Sitter City. Are you Georgia Whitley?" "Georgia is my sister," she said a little haughtily. "We don't have internet or electricity here. She arranged this for me, only because it's an emergency." "Oh, good. Then you were expecting me." "I was expecting a woman. I've heard I can be a little feminine sometimes." "Okay, well, you're here." She evaluated me with a keen eye. "I guess you will have to do." She stepped down from the porch and gestured towards her girls. "From tallest to shortest. That is, oldest to youngest, too. This is Holly, Jennifer, and Lily." I gave a little awkward kind of bow. I wasn't really sure what else to do because I would have felt weird shaking hands with a 13-year-old girl. Still, this was the strangest introduction I had ever been a part of, so I felt like some kind of formality was necessary. They are very capable of cooking and cleaning and washing themselves up. I was hoping you could help with the latter because they can get a little bit wily when they are showering together. But seeing as how you are not a female, I would rather you not. I left the money on the counter. I know it's a lot, but I won't be home until very late, so I left extra for compensation. "Thank you." She shook my hand, thanked me in return, and started walking down the road. It took me a second before I realized what she was doing. I had driven over 20 miles through nothing but bare farm country to get there. Yet I didn't see a car in sight. "Ms. Whitley," I called. She turned around. I can fit you and your girls in my car if you need a ride into town. I wouldn't mind picking you up later either. Really, it's pretty far to anything. Where are you headed? That's none of your business, James. Just do your job and I'll see you later tonight. Shit. That's weird. I turned back to the porch and everything really sunk in at that point. No electricity, no internet. Shit. I was going to have to actually babysit 3 girls for over 10 hours. As I came close to the porch, the youngest one, Lily, reached out her little hand. I smiled and reached out to shake. Suddenly, Jennifer grabbed a hold of my hand and bit as hard as she could. I yelled and yanked it back and cradled it against my chest. She had drawn blood. All 3 girls gave little giggles and fled to safety inside, slamming the door behind them. I turned to see Miss Whitley looking back at me. She must have heard me yell. I waved to her with my good hand to let her know everything was okay, and she turned to keep walking down that poorly graveled road. I went to let myself in, but the door was locked. Their 3 little faces were piled up against the window pane, glaring at me from inside. I knew at that moment that this was going to be the worst babysitting experience I had ever had. By the time I had made my way around the back, they had locked all of the doors leading in. Luckily, I was able to shimmy through a window that was left open. I found myself in the most literal definition of the word bedroom. It was exactly that. 3 beds made up to perfection and white walls and carpet and a closet. Nothing else. The hallways opened up into a living room, where I found the 3 of them seated on a large couch. In front of it was a coffee table, and on the other side of the table was a single wicker chair. "Did you get that for me?" I asked. "Is this your way of saying sorry for biting me?" "That's Bradley's chair," Lily said sweetly. "I'm not sorry," Jennifer chimed in. "You deserve it because you are a bad man. Mama said you shouldn't be here. She said if Grandma wasn't—" She broke off as Holly nudged her. She must have been treading towards unmentionable territory. By the look of things, I figured there must have been a lot of repressed unmentionable territory there. I let the subject drop. "Is Bradley your imaginary friend?" I addressed Lily, assuming that I could at least endeavor to survive through her innocence. "He's real," Jennifer said. I looked at Holly, expecting the older sister kind of knowing look. She only nodded in approval. They were all in on it then. The blood on my hand wasn't coagulating yet, so I had to suck on it as I made my way to the bathroom. "He can smell fresh blood, you know," Holly called after me. "That's why she did it. Bradley doesn't get to eat too much because he loves us too much to do anything. He asked Jennifer to get you ready for him." "That's cute," I called back. I couldn't find any Band-Aids in the bathroom, so I wrapped some toilet paper around my finger and held it in place with my other fingers. Once back in the living room, I sat down on the floor next to the chair, and we all just stared at each other in silence. No one spoke, smiled, or twitched. It was the most solemn, boring thing ever. Lily got off the couch and came up next to me. She was short enough to whisper into my ear without needing to bend down to where I sat. "We should play a game," she whispered. "That will make things funner." Returning to her place on the couch, she fell back to staring at me along with the others. I let a little time pass before asking them all together if they would like to play a game of some sort. Smiles broke over all of their faces, all except Holly. "We are not allowed to play games," she said sternly. "Lily, did you whisper that to him?" "No, she didn't," I said. "Bradley says you're a liar," Holly replied. "He's here now." I looked up at the chair. "Oh yes, there he is. Hello, Bradley. I love your hair, but you do have something showing in your teeth when you smile." Jennifer gave me a quizzical look and said, "Bradley doesn't have a mouth anymore, mister. Mama sewed it shut on account of his yelling." "Well, that's a little morbid," I said without thinking. "You don't have television. Where did you get such a creepy idea?" "Mom has a camera," she said. "Sometimes we—" She stopped short, looking furtively from Holly to Lily to me. Like her little sister before, she slid from the couch and came closer to me. Sometimes me and Lily sneak in her bedroom and look at her pictures, she whispered. That's where Bradley goes when he isn't visiting with us. Other bad boys are in there too, but they are afraid of us. I looked up at Lily and found her nodding silently, as though she had heard it all and was corroborating the story. Holly, however, was fuming. What did she tell you? She demanded. What did they do? She snatched a handful of Lily's blonde hair and yanked hard on it. What did she whisper to him, Lily? Without thinking, I rushed upon them and yanked Holly's hand away. Lily crawled away from the couch and ran off, crying. Jennifer followed her. Holly pulled her hand away and gave me a weird look. What do you want to do with me now? Something in her voice made my stomach turn. It almost seemed like she was batting her eyes at me. I scrambled away as fast as I could, suddenly conscious of the situation. Or was I? Surely this little girl wasn't implying what I thought she was implying. Go to your room, I said. Don't come out until your mom returns. I'll be waiting for you, she said sweetly before rising and leaving the living room. I could hear Jennifer consoling Lily from a place under the staircase nearby. It looked like a little cabinet door that opened into a broom closet. Inside, it seemed almost like a human-sized bird's nest. Instead of twigs, there were blankets lumped into a circle. In the middle was Jennifer with Lily's head tucked into her lap. I'm sorry I bit you, Jennifer said now as I approached. You seem like a nice man. You were alone with Holly, but you still came back to us. The other guys don't usually do that. The other guys usually go stay with her until Mom comes back. What other guys? I asked, feeling a little alarmed. What do they do? I don't know, but it must be bad. Mama comes back and she punishes them in her room upstairs and takes pictures, and then they stay up there. Only Bradley comes down. He was a good boy too. We tried to tell her Bradley didn't go into Holly's room neither, but she took him up there anyways, and now he can't leave the house. Stay here with Lily, I said. I can't explain what came over me at that moment. It was like something was tugging at my coattails, urging me towards the staircase. I suddenly felt the need to go into their mother's bedroom. Did I think I would find Bradley there? If I were being completely honest, then yes, a little part of me did think that. I would say I feel ashamed, but in a way, I really did find him there. I found him in the photo album sitting on their mother's dresser next to her bed. The camera was next to it. It did not have a brand or a label or anything. It was just a really old-looking camera. Maybe you're wondering how I knew which one was Bradley. That's easy. He was the boy with his lips sewn shut and his ears cut off. They didn't mention that last part. There were several other young men in that album too. All of them in their early 20s or teenage years. All of them with the most grotesque set of circumstances befallen them. I will spare you all of the gruesome details, but it was enough to make me really fucking sick to my stomach. Still carrying the photo album, I was guided by some invisible hand to the open window looking down onto the backyard. It was there that I found discolored patches in the dirt yard. They were large, oval shapes of misplaced dirt, and there were a lot of them. I had made up my mind to call the police. I didn't care if I looked like a crazy person. I needed someone else to know. But my phone wasn't in my pocket. I left it in my car. Just as I was about to return the photo album to the dresser, I heard a voice calling from below. Girls, I'm home early. Their mother's voice rang shrill. I felt numb. It's okay, I thought. I would just play it cool like I was looking for toys or something. I would just saunter down like normal, say hello and thank you and have a nice evening and leave. Someone cried out below. It was not the tiny, shrill crying of Lily. It was clearly from Holly. She was sobbing and approaching her mother. What is it? Her mother shrieked. Did it happen again, Holly? Holly, tell me. Holly, tell me what happened to you. Did that man make you? I didn't want to, came her crying voice. He made me do bad things, Mama. Really bad things. Footsteps were pounding up the stairs now. She was coming. I wasn't aware of it then, but I had the photo album tucked under my arm still. There was only one way down the stairs, which was surely blocked now. I had nowhere to run to. Their mother was in the doorway glaring at me. She was holding a cattle prod. approaching me with it outstretched. "You sick man," she spat. "She's only 12. I saw a band of blue lightning link between the two fork tips of the cattle prod. She was careful to bar my exit while still coming closer. I had no choice. I knew it wouldn't end well, but I had only one choice. I put one foot out the open window and thrust myself out onto the slanting roof. My foothold gave way almost instantly. I was sliding out of control towards the ledge, and my body crumpled under me like a rag doll as I struck the ground. Maybe it was because of the mud, or maybe it was just dumb luck, but I was able to raise myself up with nothing more than a twisted ankle. I limped as fast as I could to my car, turned the ignition over, and drove away. I called the police as I drove and gave them the address. Just then I remembered the photo album. It was still stuck in the mud where I fell. Cursing, I hit the steering wheel. But I couldn't be too mad, so long as I didn't have stitches running through my lips. I drove all the way to the hospital and was admitted fairly quickly. While I was lying in the cot, I received a call. "James," came a stern voice. "It's Lieutenant Getz. Look, son, we don't much appreciate being jerked around with crazy calls like this." Damn, I thought. She must have hid the photo album. There was no catching her so long as I didn't have any proof. But still, I had to try. "Okay, so the pictures aren't there anymore. But just ask the little girl. Ask Lily, she will tell you." "What little girl?" he said, sounding more irritable now. "Son, the house is empty. There's no electricity or running water. No one would live here. Your tire marks are the only sign of people I see here, and I'm beginning to wonder what the hell you were doing here." I thought better of it. I couldn't tell him that I was babysitting. It was then that I wondered, who had called me? Who sent me to that house in the first place? "I'm sorry, officer. It was just a crazy mistake." The lieutenant grunted something else, then hung up. Was I crazy? One doesn't simply imagine something like that with no history of psychological problems, do they? The curtains into my little room opened up and a nurse walked in. She was soft-spoken and had a trembling kind of grin. "My name is Georgia," she said. Her voice sounded vaguely familiar. It seems like someone has been a very busy boy. Thanks for listening to this Stories to the End. Every Wednesday and Sunday, Flashes of Memory publishes a new story.